Okay, we are way zoomed out. Okay, welcome everyone. This is Shamatha meditation in Tibetan Buddhist tradition. My name is Dan. Any of you guys first time at the temple? New to Shamatha meditation? Yeah. First time in meditation?
At this one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, welcome. Welcome to everyone who's watching on YouTube. So last week we talked about the common preliminaries of renunciation and bodhicitta. Normally, these are presented where all of the arguments, all of the rationale, all of the explanation depends on you believing in reincarnation. So since most, or at least a lot of people who are practicing Buddhism in the West don't believe in reincarnation, I've avoided these topics of renunciation and bodhicitta, even though they're considered preliminaries to shamatha. So last week we talked about what they call small motivation, which is basically means you're practicing Buddhism, but with all of the same aspirations and goals that you had before. So, you want to do better at your job, you want to just feel better, you want to be able to deal with stress. And that's perfectly fine. It's a great place to start. So this time we're going to talk about middling motivation, which is, this is in the Tibetan system. So that is when you develop this motivation for renunciation. So if I could give you a definition of renunciation relative to reincarnation, but we're trying to avoid that. So normally here they would teach you what's called the 4 thoughts that turn the mind in regular Buddhism. But every one of those points is based on reincarnation. So what we're going to do what we're doing is what most people in the West believe in is what's called materialism, which is the idea that consciousness is generated by the brain. And that's why there would be no reincarnation, because since consciousness just happens to be somehow generated by the physical brain, as soon as the physical brain is gone, the assumption is that consciousness goes away. So then can you even have renunciation or bodhicitta in that situation? I'm going to argue that you can. And so for this, we're going to look at the first 2 of the 4 noble truths. So the first noble truth is called the noble truth of suffering. Welcome. So this is pretty much, we broken into 4 parts, what this actually means. So one of the things the Buddha said was we really, really want stuff that we can't have. That's one of the ways that we suffer. Another one is there are things in our life that we really like that we can't hold on to, that are taken away from us. Another one is there are things in our life that we don't like that we wish we could be rid of. Maybe a pain in our back, maybe a annoying neighbor, and there's nothing we can do to get rid of it. And then the 4th one is there are things that we wish we could avoid, like the classic ones are old age, sickness, death, and we worry and fret and have anxiety over them, but there's nothing we can do about them. So that's another one of the ways that we suffer. So in the West, I think everyone would agree that those are ways that we suffer. In the West, it seems like we're doing our best to make sure that we're trying to beat those at their own game. So we're trying to make sure that we can have all of the things that we want. We're trying to make sure that we can hold on to things longer. We're trying to make sure we can avoid pain and sickness and death as much as possible. So we're relying on technology and medicine to make our lives better. We're in this culture of production and consumption, and we're also, it's interesting how you can kind of live however you want, make as bad of choices as you want. And when consequences arise, there's going to be some kind of pill for it, some kind of treatment or surgery. And so clearly there's some disadvantages to this in the way that we're kind of chewing up our planet like a pack of locusts. But that's one way to go about it. If the Buddha had wanted to go about it this way, he could have. He was a prince. He was very wealthy. He could have just lived his life as hedonically as he wanted to. Or he could have started and said, hey, let's try to make sure everyone's fed. Let's try to make sure everyone has, he could have invested in doctors coming in from foreign lands to try to cure sickness. But instead, he wanted to get to the causes of suffering. So that's the second noble truth. Now, you might say, the causes of suffering, didn't we literally just list them? Not having what you want, et cetera, et cetera. But in Buddhism, this is where it gets interesting, because the causes of suffering are identified as craving, aversion, and delusion. So now if you go back to that list of the things that make us suffer, if you didn't have craving, then those first two, suffering because you want things you can't have, suffering because things are taken from you that you wanted to keep, those kind of go away. Similarly, if you don't have aversion to anything, then those second two, suffering because of the things in your life that you'd like to get rid of, and suffering because of the things that are bad that you can't avoid, that one kind of goes away. Although you could still argue that it still hurts to get kicked in the shins. It still hurts to lose a loved one. Just because you don't have the aversion to it doesn't mean that you don't have the suffering of the actual thing when it arises. But when we get to, and we're not doing it today, but that's where the third cause of suffering, delusion, comes in. And at least in Tibetan Buddhism, it is considered that a fully enlightened being can feel any level of pain and not suffer. So even that physical kind of suffering can be addressed in the further progress of Buddhism. But certainly getting rid of the craving and aversion is what we're trying to do with the motivation of renunciation. So you might say, but doesn't craving guide us towards happiness? And doesn't aversion help guide us away from things that are bad for us? And so this is where I think it's interesting to look back to materialism, that theory. Now, I don't believe in materialism. I lean towards reincarnation. What I said last time is I can't prove it. So since I can't prove it, if you believe in materialism, I can't convince you otherwise. But it is kind of interesting, and I found it interesting to try to look at Buddhism from that materialistic perspective and see what kind of insights it brings. So if consciousness is generated by the brain, then do cravings and aversions, are those generated from this same consciousness that was generated by the brain? Or are they generated by the brain? And if they're generated by the brain, then are they really going to serve our needs? Or if they're generated by the brain that evolved over millions of years of the evolutionary imperative to survival of the fittest, survive, reproduce, dominate, make sure your DNA survives, and dominates over other people's DNA. If that's where craving and aversion came from, then there's no reason to expect that by following the impulses of craving and aversion, it's going to in any way serve your happiness, the quality of existence of your consciousness will not likely be served. It would be a heck of a coincidence if it was served by chasing after the cravings and aversions. So my only point here is that to think that craving is some sort of guide towards happiness and that aversion is some sort of guide towards staying away from unhappiness, it's probably the opposite. And let me see. So what I wanted us to do is consider a couple of examples. So one person has a lot of material comfort. They're healthy. They have a lot of money. They have a loving family. They're surrounded by beauty. Another person is the opposite. He's, as we call a miserable life, a lot of health problems. He's really poor. He really struggles. He has to choose between, does he spend his, he works really hard. Most of it goes to rent for his not too impressive place to live. Does he spend the rest of his money on food or the medicine he needs or the, I had another one. Oh, or paying his bills. So sometimes he goes hungry. Sometimes he feels like crap because he couldn't afford his medicine. So which one of these, if each of these people has a consciousness, which one of them is actually in a better place? You might tend to think person number one. But let's say that person number one feels like he never has enough. He always wants more. He looks at other people around him and goes, why do I have, I only have this kind of car and this big of a house. That guy has a bigger car, a bigger house. That's not fair. I wish I had that. This guy's wife is prettier than my wife. These guys' kids are smarter than my kids. So he can, and then he's worried about his health all the time, and he's worried about losing his job. And, so I think you guys get the picture. He's not really enjoying his position. And so he's probably kind of miserable. Whereas and you can also see it's the craving and aversion that are making it that way. The other guy doesn't have the craving and aversion. So yeah, whatever is going on in his life, he's grateful for it. He's grateful waking up every day. He's content with what he has. And so I would argue that his consciousness is in a better spot than the other guy. So that's where I'm saying craving and aversion are not only misaligned to our interests, but they're kind of like chains we can't escape sometimes that keep dragging us back and back into the same pain. And it says in the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, which they actually study downstairs, that but I really like this verse. It says, although seeking to avoid pain, they run headlong into suffering. They long for happiness, but foolishly destroy it as if it were their enemy. Okay, we got some waves on here. I got to make sure I watch for the comments. Okay, so what is the motivation of renunciation? And keep in mind, it's just a motivation. So we're not asking you to go too far with this, but renunciation is when you finally see that craving and aversion can never be satisfied, are the cause of suffering itself, and you would be better off if you would ignore those impulses, or even if you could get rid of them. And so it's kind of like if you have a rash on your arm and you've been saying, okay, the way to deal with this rash is just to scratch it when it itches. Now you're actually looking for the cure to the rash so that the rash is gone and you don't have to scratch it because it doesn't itch. It doesn't itch. In the Sutta Nipata, it says of renunciation to subdue greed for sensual pleasures and see renunciation as rest. Let there be nothing grasped or rejected by you. So as I said, the preliminary is simply to develop that motivation, to analyze craving and aversion, and to start living your life not chasing the objects of craving and running away from the objects of aversion. So you don't have to withdraw from worldly life completely. You don't have to shave your head and join a monastery. But rather than your Buddhist practice being a support for your worldly life becomes more of a support for your Buddhist practice. You're no longer driven to find external causes for happiness, but you're seeking to, you're seeking to resolve or solve the internal causes of your suffering. And then you're no longer striving to serve the evolutionary imperative, but you're trying to figure out what will actually satisfy or make happy your actual consciousness that has in this system that has magically, or not magically, but accidentally arisen from these complex brains that we have. So as I said, while this definitely helps eliminate a lot of the causes of suffering, we will need to look at delusion, and we'll do this next time to go a little bit further into trying to root out the causes of suffering. So any questions on any of this?
I kind of missed the quote, the tail end of it about
there was two quotes. You mean the one from the the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life? I would love to read it again. Although seeking to avoid pain, they run headlong into suffering. They long for happiness, but foolishly destroy it as if it were their enemy. I've got this coffee candy I've been sucking on, and I'm gonna have to swallow it. Okay. Because we are now getting to the meditation. I always forget to get this thing. So, and were there any other questions on this before I move on? First thing we're going to do is get into our meditation posture. Looks like you guys are ahead of me on that. I'll give you guys a second. Any posture that's alert, relaxed, and stable. We're not going to go through too many posture points today, but you do want your spine to be straight. Mainly meaning your lower spine should be nice and straight. For this, you can kind of imagine that there's a string pulling up on your head, because that kind of tallest spot is going to be your straight spine spot. But you don't want to be hunched forward, which I think is actually if your straight spine goes all the way up. But your upper torso, you want to lean it back a little bit, open up, lift your sternum, arms back a little bit, and then you can put your hands on your knees. You can do this kind of thing, or you can palm over palm. Then we're going to just take a few seconds to reflect on our motivation, why we're practicing Buddhism today. That can help with your enthusiasm, and so that you don't fall into it just being a routine that you do for no reason. So now close your eyes if they were open. And today we're going to do an imaginary meditation object. So before we get to it, we're going to warm up our imaginations a little bit. So imagine that you're sitting on a beach chair on a tropical beach, white sand. It's nighttime. So you're facing the ocean, but you're quite a bit of ways back. And you're just sitting there chilling. And it's out in the middle of nowhere, so plenty of stars in the sky, hundreds of stars in your view. The moon isn't anywhere to be seen, but as you're sitting there over the horizon, you see a kind of reddish lump and wonder what it is, and you start to realize it's the moonrise. So the moon starts rising over the horizon. Looks really big at first, starts to turn from pinkish red to more of a pale red to a yellow, and as it completely comes up out of the horizon, it's the typical white full moon that you normally would see. And as you're watching this, you fall asleep. And if you doubt whether you can fall asleep sitting up, I've seen it in here plenty of times. So you fall asleep, you don't even know how long, and then you open your eyes, and it seems like you're in a totally different place. You don't know what happened, you're still sitting there, but you're surrounded by this stone temple, kind of a big temple with kind of a dome made out of brown stone, and it's got torches kind of intermediately placed at different places along the wall. So the whole place is kind of illuminated with a soft, warm light. But the big feature of this temple is you're facing this statue made out of kind of the same brown stone. It's huge. It's about 15 feet tall. It's sitting in meditation posture. It's a humanoid form, male form, sitting in meditation posture. But its face looks a little beastish, like maybe half buffalo, half human, half bull, half human. So it's kind of a wide face. It's kind of got big, wide eyes, kind of a crazy, mean-looking face, and almost a beastly snout, more so than a normal human nose. But even that isn't the most interesting thing. On its forehead is a clear crystal gem about the size of a volleyball. Really looks like a diamond, but you know that they don't have diamonds quite that big. But inside of that diamond is a glowing, brightly glowing white orb. So the light's shining out from it and kind of illuminating the forehead of the statue, kind of making the whole thing glow, the crystal glow. So that's probably the most interesting thing. But then as you scan down the statue, at its throat, right about where the Adam's apple would be, is what looks like maybe a ruby about the same size, some kind of red crystal. And there's a glowing light, orb of light inside of that crystal. So it's causing that whole thing to glow red and spill over the red light onto the throat of the statue. Working your way down, at its chest, about the heart level, where the sternum would be, is a blue crystal, perhaps a sapphire. Same situation. There's the glowing orb of light inside of that crystal, and it's glowing blue and it's spilling over blue light onto the chest. Then working your way down to the navel, belly button, that's where there's a yellow crystal, maybe citrine, and it's having the same effect. It's got the little orb of light inside and yellow light pouring out of it, glowing with the yellow light. Then going all the way down to the base of the statue statue is sitting in cross-legged position, feet sort of in the front center of the statue, and then behind that at the base of the statue is a green crystal, maybe emerald, still volleyball sized, and it's got the glowing light in it. So the green light is spilling out, kind of illuminating the legs and the feet. So now, you're still looking at the emerald, you see that little orb of light actually moves forward towards you and leaves the space of the crystal. And you can see that it's white. It's a pure white orb, maybe about the size of a golf ball. And it starts circling kind of around the statue's hips. Then you notice movement from that yellow crystal. Same thing happens. The orb moves forward out of the crystal. It's another white, glowing white orb, and it starts circling around the stomach. And then the same thing happens at the blue crystal. And so now there's a white glowing orb circling around the chest. Same thing happens at the throat with the red crystal. The white orb exits and starts circling around the neck. Then you notice all four of these circling white orbs start to kind of spiral upwards towards the forehead of the statue. And so all five of these white crystal orbs, the one that was already up there in the forehead, and these other four, all join together into one bigger, brighter, glowing white orb. So now it gets a little interesting because with this extra light and energy, you start to actually see rays of light. Like if you're shining a flashlight in the rain or in the fog, you can see actual rays of light beaming out from this clear crystal, and they are kind of changing direction. You know, they're not just sitting in one direction. They're kind of dancing around, going to different directions, creating kind of a play of light on the walls of the temple as these rays dance around and illuminate different parts of the walls and of the dome. But you start to notice, though, that the rays start to flicker. And when the rays of light flicker, it seems like the walls and the dome flicker a little bit too. They flicker in and out of existence. And they start flickering more and flickering off longer, and you start to see that when they flicker off, the statue disappears, the gemstones disappear. Everything flickers on and off with the flickering of these rays. The only thing that stays is this glowing white orb in the forehead. But even the crystal it was in vanishes with each flickering. The flickering becomes more intense. The rays become more and more unstable until finally you can see that beyond the temple, beyond the statue, is actually the same starry sky and sandy beach and ocean that you were sitting in before you fell asleep. Everything else was just an illusion. And as that illusion fades, you still see the glowing bright orb, still shines brightly, but even it starts to fade in intensity and in size until it disappears, leaving you staring at the full moon in its place. So our meditation object is going to be that glowing white orb. Try to imagine that in somewhere in your headspace, wherever it feels the most natural to you. And maybe it's the size of a golf ball, whatever size is easiest for you to imagine. You might find bigger is easier, but if you want to imagine it, down to the size of a pearl, that's also fine. So you might find that it starts to fade in your imagination because your imagination starts getting tired. So what we're going to do is alternate with our breath. So breathe slowly, and on the in-breath, concentrate on imagining this glowing white orb as vividly as you can. And then on the exhale, you can completely relax your imagination. If you still see the orb, that's fine. If it goes away, that's also fine. And just continue like that on the inhale. Focus your attention and concentrate on your imagination. Try to see that orb as vividly as possible. And then on the exhale, just give yourself a break and rest in the present moment. So you can probably hear the siren in the distance. That's from some real ambulance fire truck. You know that the sound of my voice is real. The feeling of your body is real. Thoughts are real. Memories are real. You know who you are. Your sense of self is real. And this white orb, is something you're just imagining. What we're going to do is we're going to completely reverse that. So just for the sake of this meditation, the glowing white orb is the only thing that's real. Everything else is being projected from that orb. So anything you see, anything you hear, anything you feel is like a virtual reality movie being projected out of that glowing orb. Not only that, any thoughts, memories, your very sense of self is just an illusion projected from the orb. The glowing white orb is the only thing that's real. So now, when you intensify your focus, it's not that you're trying to imagine the orb with more effort. You're trying to see the orb that's already there. So it's sort of like if you were trying to see the full moon on a cloudy day, you can't see it through the clouds. But what if those clouds were simply a projection of the moon? And by really, really focusing your attention, you could see through the clouds and see the moon. So on the inhale, you're trying to just see that glowing white orb as vividly as possible. Then on the exhale, you can just relax. If you still see it, you still see it. If you don't, if it obscures itself again, that's totally fine. Just relax with whatever is in the present moment. And continue like that on the inhale. Try to see the glowing white orb that's projecting everything. On the exhale, just rest with the entire world of your senses and mind, which is a projection of the orb. So again, for the sake of this meditation, everything you're seeing, if you're seeing any light, color on the back of your eyelids, anything you hear, including the sound of my voice, anything you're feeling in your body, any emotions, thoughts, memories, any cravings, any aversions, any fears, anxieties, and even your sense of identity, all being projected moment by moment by this glowing orb. You can even think of the sounds being projected out through your ears, out into the world around you. Your feeling of your body being projected down your neck into the space below your head. Every moment, just like a movie, every frame is different. Every moment is a completely new projection. As that projection vanishes, the next frame replaces it. So now on the inhale, just as before, focus on seeing that glowing white orb that's projecting everything. And then now on the exhale, try to connect a little bit to that. Still relax your attention, but try to connect a little bit to that outflow of energy from the orb that's projecting outward and projecting everything that you see, hear, feel, taste, smell, touch, your entire reality. Try to connect to a sense of that energy being projected from the orb. Then on the inhale, let all that go. Focus your attention on trying to see the orb as clearly as possible. And then on the exhale, release that and just kind of try to relax into that outward flow of energy back into that illusionary projected reality. So before we end this meditation, there's one important last step. We're going to reverse things back. So now the orb is illusionary. It's just a figment of your imagination. Everything that you hear, everything you see, everything you feel, any emotions, thoughts, memories, the very sense of self, all of that is real again. So just for a few minutes, just go back to imagining the orb as imaginary on the inhale and feeling your real world as real on the exhale. You guys can open your eyes back up again. Maybe stretch a little bit. Come back to the real world. I'm very curious how that went for everyone. I'm going through meditations right now from a book, Pointing Out the Great Way by Daniel P. Brown. When I got to this one at first, I was like, okay, I'm going to skip this one. But I was, started practicing it, and I actually found it very helpful. So I realize it's a little different. It's maybe a little tricky, but I'm very curious how it went for you guys. So I'm just going to sit here until I get some feedback.
I thought it was interesting. It was, there was so much. I'm not used to that much to think about while I'm meditating.
Yeah.
In a way,
Yeah.
Which ended up sort of being a good thing because I was sort of getting confused as to where I was at, and I like trying to see the orb, and maybe not necessarily like being able to visualize it as well as maybe I wanted to. But then it also led to me just sort of feeling as though I got some nice stretches of concentration in there, like where I was able to. I wasn't thinking about anything.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it sort of confused myself into a pretty nice.
It's like a koan.
State, yeah. And then and then all of a sudden the orb came back in the end a little bit. Like I saw more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I found it interesting. I thought, this was cool.
Yeah. Sometimes with imagination, because if you think about it, sometimes when you're trying to meditate, it's your imagination that carries you away, right? So if you're trying to corral your imagination and use your imagination, and even wearing out your imagination, and then it can make meditation a little easier. But then there could also be times where you're like, okay, will this guy just shut up and let me meditate? So there's pros and cons to this kind of meditation. What did you think about the whole like flipping it around? Because we did white Bindu meditation before, but we just imagined the white orb. We didn't do the part. This was from unique to this book where you actually try to flip it around and see everything as an emanation of projection of the orb.
I liked it. It was complex. I feel like that took a little framework to kind of visualize that. It was cool.
Yeah, good. So you like it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I felt like I was in the Indiana Jones temple.
In the beginning part? Yeah.
I just was like, oh wow, here we are.
Yeah.
I liked it. It was really interesting. It was an interesting way to concentrate. And then when you said like, okay, it's an illusion again, kind of to me kind of shifted. It was cool. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. because this feedback's important to whether or not I would do a meditation like this again. You know, if you guys all said, "Man, that was confusing. I did not get anything out of it."
It was cool trying to like sort of imagine those sort of altered realities with where am I, this time I guess this is a recovery one, so you can talk about. But I smoked a salvia one time, and it just sort of took me to this whole crazy place. And so I was trying to imagine like going into that weird reality again, like just with my mind instead, and it kind of worked. I was sort of just sitting in this sort of fuzzy space surrounding me. So
So you're having salvia flashbacks over there.
but much less frightening than the original.
Yeah, because you're not chemically altering your brain. That's
That was the fun part. I was like, oh my gosh, reality's coming back. That's the worst part. That's the good part.
is when reality comes back.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You could have just stayed in reality in the first place, as far as the salvia goes. Yeah, reality itself. Yeah. Did you have something you want to say, Anna?
I thought the visualization that you brought through was really helpful.
Mhm.
At least for me, that was like a base for me to be like, okay, that's high. I have no idea where we're going with this afterwards. This is great. But it was helpful to go into the imagination, come out of the imagination. Also for me, because we were just talking about a white orb, I am obsessed with the moon. So it was very easy for me to go from the white orbs to, before you even said anything about having the orb in your headspace, it was already there in a certain place in my actual head.
Yeah.
So I kind of found myself almost doing things before you prompted them.
Right.
When the orb became the only real thing and we were an illusion.
Yeah.
It almost to me looked as like a dark hole, black hole. It almost looked like the opposite of a black hole.
Oh wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it.
I felt the stream, like when you mentioned the stream of energy.
Yeah.
That was like creating us. I had already felt that before you said it.
It's almost like a Big Bang.
Yeah.
But a gentle, slow Big Bang.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
To be created.
Yeah.
Moment in that way and to feel that connection with it, really cool.
So do you have a pretty vivid imagination normally? Yeah. So the imagining the orb was easy for you?
Keeping it consistently was difficult. There was, at least when it was the only real thing, that was when it was the most difficult to keep it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And did it help to give yourself that break when you exhale?
No.
Okay.
I just kept.
So you didn't find that after you exhaled, and then at least in the first moment when you came back and tried to imagine it again? Because for me, it's usually most vivid when I first try to start imagining it, and then it kind of fades from there.
I think a couple of times at first it was, and then it just stayed that way.
Stayed hard to visualize.
Stayed bright.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it didn't, the cloudiness, the dim
Right.
of it stopped happening.
Oh, it stopped happening, so it stayed bright.
Stopped happening after a couple of times.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the things I like about it being the only real thing is that if you can't, like if you're supposed to be imagining it and you can't imagine it, then it's like it's not there. If you're pretending that it's real, then even when you can't see it, you can still kind of have an idea that it's still there. So I like that aspect of it. But some people found last time we did this that as long as I was guiding it, their imaginations were vivid, and then as soon as the guidance stopped, it was harder to keep their imagination going. And I certainly find that way. It was actually fun for me to play the recording back and go through the guidance myself to my own voice, and like it was like, wow, this is so much easier when I'm guiding myself through it than if I was just sitting here trying to imagine it myself. So any more questions or comments? If not, we can jump back in for a few more minutes. So back into your meditation posture. We won't do the temple scene again. I'll ring the bell and let's go right back into it. So just go right back to that. I'll let you go at your own pace in terms of it's imagination, and then it's real. And then I'll give you a little bit of a warning before we come back out so that you can get back to reality again. So just as a reminder, on the in-breath, you're imagining the orb. And on the out-breath, you're releasing out at the point where the orb is real. You're trying to see it. And then when you exhale, you relax, connect to reality, actually connect to the projections of the orb, which is everything that you see, hear, feel, etc. So if your orb is still imaginary, now might be a good time to flip things around. now would be a good time to make the orb imaginary again. Continue to focus on the imaginary orb on the inhale, and then relax your attention and just be with the present moment of real sights, real sounds, real body, real thoughts, real mind. And we'll do that for just a little bit. Okay, you guys can open your eyes. Move around a little bit. We're almost out of time, but if anyone has any questions, and I was also curious how it went for people without the guidance this time. Were you guys able to remember what to do, and or would you have done better, do you think, with guidance the second time too?
I would have done better with guidance. I had trouble getting it back in place. It's a place where it helped to me to walk through and then we get it there.
Yeah.
So,
That's good feedback. Yeah, I probably should have. I didn't want to go through the whole temple scene again, but I probably should have done something quickly to get everyone's imagination primed. Did anyone else feel that way? Pop right back up. Good. Yeah. Excellent. Has any of you guys seen the movie Office Space? Huh?
The stapler one?
The stapler one, yeah. Because the whole point, or the main plot in that one, it reminds me of this last part of this meditation, because the whole plot in that one is the guy gets hypnotized, and the psychologist who's hypnotizing him dies while he's under hypnosis. So he never gets snapped out of it, because the guy's like, when I snap my fingers, you're gonna be out of it. So he's like walking around like he's super, super calm and like super, super chill, and doesn't worry about anything because he's in this like permanent hypnosis. So I want to, with the end of this meditation, I want to make sure that you guys don't walk out of here where everything's a projection of the orb and the orb's the only thing that's real. You might actually do a lot better, you walk around like little Buddhas. But I wanted to bring you back to your illusory world, bring you back to samsara before we ended our time together. So we'll do, and yeah, if you guys are on YouTube, you can type your questions in now, but I don't see anything, and we're officially out of time. So we'll do a quick transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice benefit all the living beings without exception, and may all sentient beings free themselves from the suffering caused by craving and delusion, the causes of suffering. Thanks, everyone. Anna has a few announcements, and then you guys can all go.
Hi, friends. I'm Anna. So the Dragobang Temple was opened 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead, nobody's nuns or monks or gurus, masters or teachers, and no one's looking for students. They're just practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice, just like Dan did tonight. Thank you. Every night, there's different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. There's also a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone experiencing addiction. There's also a food redistribution program every Thursday at 4:30 for poor kids. There's classes and programs every day, and everything is always free. Full schedule is on the website as well as listed outside on the shoe rail. There's a lending library if you see a book you like to use it, bring it back or bring others back that are Buddhist related to you. And if you guys could just straighten your seats, you're switching as you leave, maybe close the window or two, and
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.